Have you ever noticed how life sometimes whispers to you through strange coincidences? Numbers repeating, people showing up at the exact moment you were thinking of them, or events aligning in ways that feel far too precise to be random. We call these experiences signs. But the question is, what do they really mean? Are they just tricks of the mind? Or are they glimpses into a deeper order that lies beneath the surface of everyday reality? This is where the concept of synchronicity comes alive. It is not about superstition or wishful thinking. It's about a profound connection between the inner world of thought, emotion, and intention, and the outer world of events and circumstances. The moments we label as synchronicities are not accidents. They are invitations. They are signals that the boundary between the psychological and the universal, between the personal and the cosmic, is thinner than we think. In this talk, I want to take you beyond the surface fascination with signs and coincidences. I want to explore the deeper meaning of synchronicity, why it happens, what it reveals about the human mind, and how it may guide us toward growth, purpose, and alignment with something far larger than ourselves. Because when you keep seeing signs, it's not just the universe playing games. It's life reminding you that you are part of a hidden dialogue, one that has been unfolding all along. When we talk about synchronicity, the first step is to be clear about what it actually is. The term itself was introduced by the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, who used it to describe what he called meaningful coincidences. Now, at first glance, that might sound like a simple idea. Events that happen at the same time and somehow matter to us. But Jung meant something far more profound than mere coincidence. He was pointing to a quality of experience where the boundaries between inner thought and outer event dissolve, where something that arises in your mind finds an echo in the external world. Let's take a simple example. Imagine you're thinking about an old friend you haven't spoken to in years, and just as you're about to reach for your phone, a message from them appears on your screen. Or perhaps you've been wrestling with a difficult decision, and suddenly you overhear a conversation between strangers that seems to address your very dilemma. These moments often leave us stunned, sometimes even unsettled, because they carry a weight that feels personal. They are not neutral, they feel charged, as though the universe itself were somehow in dialogue with us. That is synchronicity. What makes it different from coincidence is the presence of meaning. Two events might occur together, but unless there is a sense of symbolic connection, they remain random. If you see a car pass by, that's nothing special. But if the license plate happens to display the exact numbers you've been dreaming about for weeks, something shifts. Suddenly, you experience the event as part of your story, as though life itself had arranged it to reflect something back to you. The meaning is not in the event alone. It's in the resonance between you and the event. Jung believes synchronicity reveals something essential about the psyche, that it is not isolated, not locked away inside our skulls, but mysteriously entangled with the external world. He saw it as evidence of what he called the collective unconscious, a deep layer of reality where psyche and matter meet. In other words, synchronicity challenges the idea that our minds are sealed containers. Instead, it suggests that consciousness and the universe are in dialogue, woven into a single fabric. Now, some might argue that this is simply the brain's pattern, seeking behavior. And yes, the human mind is wired to connect dots, sometimes even where none exist. We notice patterns, we interpret them, and we create narratives that make sense of them. But here is the crucial point. Even if synchronicity were just the mind-imposing meaning, the experience itself is still transformative. The moment still holds power. The sense of connection can reorient your decisions, ignite your creativity, or deepen your sense of purpose. Meaning, whether we call it psychological or metaphysical, has the power to move us. But there's more. If we reduce synchronicity entirely to mere chance or cognitive illusion, we miss the richness of the experience. Because time and again, people report synchronicities that go beyond probability, beyond what random statistics can comfortably explain. A series of events that unfold with such uncanny precision that dismissing them as coincidence seems intellectually lazy. At that point, we are invited to entertain the possibility that life is not just a collection of mechanical events, but a living system of interconnections in which we participate. This is why Jung insisted that synchronicity was not superstition, but a principle, and a causal connecting principle. A causal, because the connection between thought and event is not explained by physical cause and effect. Instead, it is explained by meaning itself, by a symbolic resonance that binds the two together. In this way, synchronicity pushes us to expand our understanding of reality, to accept that meaning is not only a private, subjective experience, but also something woven into the very structure of existence. And so, when you find yourself encountering synchronicities, the real question is not, did I just imagine that? But rather, what is this moment asking me to notice? Because synchronicity, at its core, is less about predicting the future or offering magical answers, and more about awakening your attention. It nudges you into awareness of your own inner landscape and its mysterious dialogue with the outer world. To define synchronicity, then, is not to box it into a neat formula, but to recognize its role as a bridge between thought and matter, between the individual and the universe, between the conscious mind and the deeper order of existence. It's the reminder that meaning is not something we merely invent inside our heads, but something we discover, as if the world itself were whispering clues about who we are and where we are meant to go. So when synchronicity appears, take it seriously, but not literally. It does not mean the universe is a vending machine for signs, or that every flicker of coincidence is a message. It means you are awake enough to notice the dialogue, to read the symbols, to enter the conversation. And in that moment, life ceases to be random and becomes something else entirely, a mirror of your own unfolding story. Because synchronicity is not just coincidence. It is meaning meeting you at the exact point where you are ready to receive it. If we want to understand why synchronicity feels so powerful, we have to begin with something fundamental about human nature, our drive for meaning. More than food, more than comfort, more than even safety, the human spirit craves a sense that life has purpose, that the events we experience are not just random, but part of a larger story. Without meaning, existence becomes hollow. With meaning, even suffering can be endured. Even chaos can be faced with courage. Philosophers, psychologists, and mystics across time have all pointed to this truth. Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps, wrote that those who had a why could survive almost anyhow. Jung himself insisted that meaning was not a luxury, but a necessity for psychological wholeness. And if we look closer at our everyday lives, we see it too. We are constantly weaving meaning into the fabric of our experiences. A glance, a word, a number, a chance encounter. All of these become threads in the larger narrative we tell ourselves about who we are and where we are going. This is why synchronicity strikes such a deep chord. It is not simply that two events align in time. It is that they align with the deep need of the psyche to feel connected to a larger order. When a synchronicity occurs, it reassures us that life is not indifferent, that there is a hidden architecture holding the pieces together. And whether you interpret that architecture as divine intelligence, quantum entanglement, or the symbolic genius of the unconscious mind, the effect is the same. You feel less alone, less adrift, more anchored in a story that matters. Science can explain a great deal about how the world works, but it often stops short of addressing this hunger for meaning. In a strictly materialist framework, events are random, governed by probability and chance, and any significance we assign is considered subjective. But the human being cannot live on mechanics alone. To reduce every synchronicity to mere probability is like reducing a symphony to the vibration of strings. It is technically accurate, but it misses the point of why the music moves us. Meaning is the music of life. It is not reducible to parts. It is something emergent, something greater than the sum. Think about the stories we carry from childhood. Every culture, every civilization has myth, ritual, and symbol. These are not trivial. They are the operating system of the human soul. And synchronicity feels like myth breaking through into daily life. It feels like symbols stepping out of the unconscious and into the street you walk every day. Suddenly, the ordinary becomes extraordinary, and the mundane becomes sacred. This is why so many people, when faced with moments of great change or crisis, report an increase in synchronicities. It is as though the psyche, under stress or transformation, seeks confirmation that it is not lost, that there is still direction, still meaning, still a pattern even when life feels chaotic. The signs that appear are not simply random. They are the psyche's way of mirroring back to itself. Yes, this matters. Yes, you are on the path. And here lies the challenge and the invitation. Synchronicity shows us how profoundly we are meaning makers, but it also asks us to recognize that the act of noticing meaning transforms our experience of reality. Life can be random noise, or it can be a conversation. The difference is whether we are awake enough to listen. But there is a subtle danger too. If we chase meaning blindly, we risk falling into superstition, reading messages into everything and losing perspective. The true power of synchronicity is not in treating every coincidence as cosmic instruction, but in letting the meaningful ones deepen our awareness. It is about balance, recognizing the hunger for meaning, but not letting it control us. In that balance, synchronicity becomes a guide, not a crutch, a mirror, not an escape. So when you keep seeing signs, ask yourself not only what they seem to say, but why they matter to you. Why does this number catch your attention? Why does this encounter stir your emotions? What inner dialogue is being reflected outward? That is the point where synchronicity shifts from mere fascination into real transformation. At its heart, synchronicity is not just about events lining up. It is about the human being encountering the truth of their own nature. That we are creatures of meaning, creatures who long to see order in the chaos, creatures who feel most alive when life itself seems to speak to us. And so the next time synchronicity appears in your life, remember this. It is not simply the universe winking at you. It is your own hunger for meaning finding its reflection in the world. That hunger is not weakness. It is your compass. And if you learn to follow it with discernment and courage, it will lead you closer to the life you are meant to live. If we accept that synchronicity is not random coincidence, but meaningful alignment, then we must also ask, where does that meaning come from? This is where the idea of signs as mirrors of the psyche becomes essential. Because in many ways, what we notice outside of us is often a reflection of what is stirring within us. Think about it every day. You are bombarded with countless impressions, images, conversations, numbers, and events. Yet you do not notice them all. Your awareness acts like a filter, selecting certain details and ignoring others. And the question is, what determines what you notice? It is not just the external event. It is also your inner state, your desires, your fears, your unconscious preoccupations. That is why one person sees a repeating number sequence everywhere while another person never notices it. The event is out there for everyone, but the resonance lies in the psyche of the observer. Jung understood this profoundly. He often said that the psyche projects itself outward, coloring our perception of reality. Synchronicity, then, is not merely the universe dropping clues at random. It is the psyche recognizing itself, reflected back in the world. The signs are not outside of us in some detached way. They are intimately tied to what we are carrying within. Take, for example, someone who has just lost a loved one. Suddenly, everywhere they turn, they may notice symbols of death, rebirth, or connection to the afterlife, perhaps in songs on the radio, in overheard conversations, or in the chance appearance of a white feather. To an outside observer, these may seem trivial, but for the grieving psyche, they are profound mirrors, reflecting back the need for comfort, continuity, and reassurance. The signs carry weight precisely because they mirror the emotional landscape of the one perceiving them. This mirror, like quality, is why synchronicity can be so transformative. It reveals aspects of ourselves that may be hidden, unconscious, or unacknowledged. By appearing externally, they force us to confront them. A sign can stir us to ask questions we have been avoiding, to face truths we have suppressed, or to acknowledge desires we were afraid to admit. In that way, synchronicity becomes less about predicting the future and more about illuminating the present, about showing us who we are in this very moment. And this insight leads to something even more fascinating. Synchronicity can serve as a form of dialogue between conscious and unconscious. The conscious mind may be uncertain, confused, or skeptical, while the unconscious communicates through symbols, images, and patterns. Synchronicity is one of the bridges between these realms. When you notice a sign, it is often the unconscious trying to speak in a language the conscious mind cannot ignore. It is the psyche saying, "Pay attention here. This matters." But let's also be clear. To say that signs are mirrors of the psyche does not mean they are just in your head. Dismissing them as mere psychological tricks misses the point. The psyche is not limited to the brain. It is part of the fabric of reality itself. What you perceive in the world and what you feel inside are not separate domains. They are entangled. The mirror is real. And when you honor it, you begin to see life not as a series of meaningless accidents, but as an unfolding conversation between self and world. Of course, this requires discernment. Not every coincidence is a mirror of deep meaning. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, as Freud would say. The key is to notice the quality of resonance. Real synchronicities feel charged, alive, uncanny. They tug at your awareness in a way ordinary events do not. They make you pause, reflect, and often reorient your course. That is the sign of a true mirror. It compels you to look at yourself differently. So the invitation here is to shift the way you engage with the signs you see. Instead of asking only, "What does this mean about the universe?" also ask, "What does this mean about me? Why did I notice this now? What part of me is being reflected back?" When you approach synchronicity this way, the signs stop being passive curiosities and become active tools for self-discovery. They deepen your relationship with your own psyche, and by extension, with the world around you. Because in the end, synchronicity is not merely about mysterious forces orchestrating your path. It is about you seeing yourself more clearly in the mirror of life. The signs that appear are not random intrusions. They are revelations, reminding you of the dialogue always taking place between your inner world and the outer one. And the more you recognize that, the more empowered you become, not because the signs control you, but because they awaken you. They remind you that meaning is not hidden somewhere far away. It is already alive within you, waiting to be reflected back. So the next time a sign appears, don't just look outward. Look inward. Because synchronicity is not only the universe speaking, it is your own soul recognizing itself in the mirror. Up to this point, we've explored synchronicity as a psychological and symbolic phenomenon, meaningful coincidences that reflect the inner workings of the psyche back to us. But there's another layer that demands attention, and it takes us into territory that stretches beyond psychology and into the frontier of science. I'm talking about the strange, mysterious world of quantum physics, a field that, perhaps unexpectedly, offers a language for understanding synchronicity in ways that classical science cannot. In the classical view of reality, events are connected only through cause and effect. One thing happens, it produces another, and the chain continues. Everything is mechanical, predictable, and linear. But quantum physics disrupted this tidy picture of reality. At the quantum level, particles do not behave like tiny billiard balls bouncing predictably. They behave like probabilities, like clouds of potential, existing in multiple states until observed. In other words, the act of observation itself changes the outcome. Now, why does this matter for synchronicity? Because synchronicity, as Jung described it, is a causal connecting principle. It is not explained by direct cause and effect but by meaningful alignment. And in the quantum world, we see something very similar. Events connected not by visible mechanisms, but by strange, non-local relationships. Take quantum entanglement, for instance. When two particles interact and then separate, they can remain mysteriously linked, no matter how far apart they travel. Change one particle, and the other responds instantly, faster than the speed of light. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance, because it defies the logic of classical physics, and yet, experiments continue to confirm it. This phenomenon shows us that at a fundamental level, reality is interconnected in ways that are invisible and a causal by ordinary standards. This begins to sound a lot like the territory of synchronicity. If matter itself can be entangled across vast distances, why should it be unthinkable that the psyche and the external world might also be entangled in ways science is only beginning to glimpse? Jung, in fact, collaborated with the physicist Wolfgang Pauli, a Nobel Prize-winning pioneer of quantum theory, to explore this very question. Together, they speculated that synchronicity and quantum phenomena might point to an underlying unity of psyche and matter, what Jung called the unus mundus, or a one world. It is here that science and spirituality start to overlap. From a quantum perspective, the world is not a machine made of separate parts, but a web of relationships, a field of interconnectedness. From a psychological perspective, synchronicity reveals that our experiences are not isolated either, but woven into a greater tapestry of meaning. When we bring these two perspectives together, synchronicity becomes more than a subjective curiosity. it becomes a clue to the deeper architecture of reality itself. Of course, we should be careful not to misuse quantum theory as a metaphor for everything mysterious. Physics has its domain, psychology has its own, and we must respect the integrity of both. But the resonance between them is undeniable. Both suggest that reality is more fluid, more connected, and more responsive than the old mechanical worldview ever allowed. Both invite us to see that the observer is never separate from the observed. That consciousness is not an isolated accident, but an integral part of the unfolding cosmos. And this is perhaps the most profound implication. Synchronicity may not just be about the psyche interpreting external events. It may be about the psyche actively participating in the shaping of those events in ways that we cannot yet fully measure. If observation affects reality at the quantum level, perhaps awareness itself is not passive, but creative. Perhaps meaning is not just something we discover in synchronicity, but something we co-create with the universe. When you notice a synchronicity, a chance encounter, a symbol, a pattern, consider for a moment that your awareness of it is not incidental. The very act of noticing may be part of what brings it into being, just as the act of observing a particle brings its potential into form. Synchronicity, then, is not only a mirror of your psyche, but also a sign of your participation in a deeper reality. It is evidence that consciousness itself is woven into the structure of the cosmos, not as a spectator but as a player. If this is true, then synchronicity is not just a passive phenomenon we marvel at. It is an invitation to recognize the power of awareness, the responsibility of consciousness, and the profound truth that we are participants in the unfolding of reality. So when you keep seeing signs, do not dismiss them as random curiosities. See them as reminders that you are entangled with life at levels far deeper than you can perceive. See them as evidence that your awareness matters. That meaning itself may be one of the fundamental forces of existence. Because synchronicity, viewed through the lens of quantum connection, is not just about strange coincidences. It is about the revelation that you are not separate from the world you live in. You are woven into it, inseparably, mysteriously, and meaningfully. At this point, you might be wondering, how do we actually tell the difference between a mere coincidence and a true synchronicity? After all, both involve unlikely events lining up. Both can feel surprising, and both can capture our attention for a moment. The difference, however, lies not in the mathematics of probability, but in the quality of meaning that accompanies the experience. A coincidence is an accident of timing. It's when two things happen to occur together, but they carry no deeper significance. You might bump into a colleague at the grocery store, or hear a word twice in a day that you've never noticed before. These moments are curious, sometimes amusing, but they don't pierce the surface of your awareness. They come and go like ripples on water, quickly forgotten. Synchronicity, by contrast, refuses to be forgotten. It carries a charge, an almost electric quality that grips you. Something inside you knows it is not random. It feels like a message or a mirror or a signpost. It arrives at a moment when you are ready, or perhaps when you most need it, to confront a question, make a decision, or recognize a truth about yourself. Its power lies not in improbability alone, but in timing and meaning combined. It resonates with your inner world so perfectly that you cannot help but feel it was arranged. Consider an example. Imagine you've been debating whether to leave your job, and the thought consumes your inner dialogue. You step outside for air, and as you walk, you overhear a stranger say, "Sometimes you just have to leap." At that moment, you glance down and notice a poster on the wall with the word freedom in bold letters. This cluster of experiences may not impress a statistician. After all, words and posters are everywhere. But to you, in that exact state of mind, it lands with force. It feels like the world is answering the question you've been carrying inside. That's synchronicity. Now contrast this with coincidence. Suppose you're thinking about your favorite childhood cartoon, and minutes later it comes up on the television. That's interesting, yes. Maybe you smile at the timing. But unless it touches something deeper in you, unless it feels like part of your inner dialogue spilling outward, it doesn't have the same transformative weight. It is coincidence without synchronicity. This distinction matters because it prevents us from falling into the trap of seeing meaning everywhere indiscriminately. If we begin to label every trivial overlap as a sign, we dilute the power of true synchronicity. The key is to notice the difference in quality. Synchronicity humbles you, arrests your attention, compels you to pause. Coincidence entertains you briefly, then evaporates. Philosophically, this raises an intriguing point. Meaning is not inherent in the external event alone. It emerges in the relationship between the event and the psyche experiencing it. A number on a license plate means nothing to one person and everything to another who has been dreaming that number for weeks. The same event, two different experiences. Meaning is the decisive factor, and meaning is what makes synchronicity alive. This also explains why synchronicity so often coincides with moments of transition, crisis, or inner searching. In those times, the psyche is primed for resonance, like a tuning fork waiting for the right note to set it vibrating. Coincidences may be happening around you all the time, but it is only when your inner state is attuned that they crystallize into synchronicity. Awareness transforms accident into significance. But here is where things get even more profound. If synchronicity arises not just from external chance, but from the interplay of psyche and world, then we begin to see that the difference between coincidence and synchronicity is not a matter of statistics at all. It is a matter of consciousness. Coincidence is what you experience when you are asleep to meaning. Synchronicity is what you experience when you are awake to it. This realization carries responsibility. It means that you, as the observer, are not a passive recipient of synchronicities, but an active participant in them. The openness of your awareness, the depth of your reflection, and the honesty with which you face your own inner life. All of these determine whether life appears as a series of empty accidents or as a dialogue filled with guidance. The same world, two different experiences. So the next time you are confronted with an uncanny alignment of events, pause. Ask yourself, does this feel charged with meaning? Does it speak directly to the questions or struggles I am carrying within? Or is it simply a curiosity that entertains me for a moment? That discernment is what allows synchronicity to retain its power. Because the true difference between coincidence and synchronicity is the difference between noise and signal, between background static and a clear message. Coincidences are the random sparks of life. Synchronicity is the fire that lights the path. We've established that the difference between coincidence and synchronicity lies in meaning, in that unmistakable sense of resonance that reaches into your psyche. But here's the crucial insight: meaning can only be recognized by awareness. Without awareness, even the most extraordinary synchronicity passes by unnoticed. Awareness is the key that unlocks the significance of these moments. Every day, countless events unfold around us: symbols, conversations, patterns, encounters. But only a fraction of them register in our consciousness. Most are filtered out, discarded by the mind as irrelevant noise. Yet within that noise may lie precisely the message, the alignment, the synchronicity we need to see. The only reason we miss it is because we are moving too fast, too distracted, or too numb to notice. In that sense, synchronicity is not only about the universe presenting signs, but about us cultivating the capacity to see them. This brings us to an uncomfortable but liberating truth. Synchronicity is less about luck and more about perception. It is not that some people are favored by the cosmos with more signs than others. It is that some people are simply more attentive. They have trained themselves, consciously or unconsciously, to slow down and to notice. They live with a heightened receptivity, an openness, that allows the symbolic dimension of life to shine through. Jung often remarked that synchronicity appears when a person is in a state of heightened inner tension, when unconscious contents are pressing toward the surface, demanding recognition. But even then, not everyone notices. The decisive factor is awareness. Without it, the unconscious presses but remains unheard. With it, the outer world suddenly lights up with patterns that speak directly to the inner state. This is why awareness is not a passive quality. It is an active discipline. It requires a shift from drifting through life on autopilot to inhabiting the present moment with a sense of curiosity and presence. When you cultivate awareness, you begin to see that reality itself is alive with signs. The ordinary becomes extraordinary, not because the world has changed, but because you are finally awake to it. Consider the difference between walking through a city lost in your thoughts versus walking with awareness. In the first case, the world blurs by. In the second, you notice the fragments of conversation that reach your ear, the images on walls, the symbols on billboards, the numbers on passing cars. These details may appear random, but in a state of awareness, they often mirror back your inner questions with uncanny precision. Synchronicity, in this sense, is less about the world suddenly deciding to speak and more about you finally listening. Of course, this raises another question. How do we avoid becoming paranoid or delusional, seeing signs in everything? The answer lies in discernment. Awareness is not the same as obsession. True awareness carries a quiet, centered quality. It is about openness, not grasping. When synchronicity appears in a state of awareness, it does not inflate the ego or feed compulsive thinking. It grounds you. It feels like a reminder rather than a command, an invitation rather than a demand. And there is something else that awareness gives us: the ability to respond. A synchronicity without awareness passes by as background noise. A synchronicity with awareness becomes an opportunity for transformation. The act of noticing is what allows you to integrate the meaning into your life, to let it guide a decision, shift a perspective, or awaken a deeper sense of trust in the unfolding of your path. Think of it this way: the universe may be whispering all the time, but only awareness allows you to hear. And when you hear, you are no longer a passive spectator of life's coincidences. You are an active participant in its dialogue. Awareness turns randomness into revelation. But awareness is not just about catching rare moments of synchronicity. It is a way of living. It is a mode of perception that transforms the fabric of daily life. The more you cultivate it, the more you see that synchronicity is not occasional, but constant, woven into the texture of existence itself. Awareness reveals that life is not silent. It is speaking continuously. Most of us have simply forgotten how to listen. So the task really is simple but profounder: slow down, pay attention, Listen inwardly and look outwardly with openness. Notice what resonates, what repeats, what feels charged with significance. Don't force meaning where it doesn't exist, but don't ignore the moments that carry weight either. Because synchronicity is not reserved for mystics or visionaries. It is available to anyone who dares to live with awareness. And in cultivating that awareness, you begin to experience life not as a series of disconnected events, but as a flowing conversation, an unfolding dialogue between your inner world and the cosmos around you. And here's the truth worth carrying with you. The signs have always been there. It is awareness that makes them visible. Awareness is the bridge that turns coincidence into synchronicity, accident into alignment, noise into meaning. So if you want to live in dialogue with life itself, the first step is simple: wake up. If awareness is the key that allows us to notice synchronicities, then we have to ask, why do they tend to appear at certain moments in life more than others? Why is it that signs intensify when we stand at a crossroads, when we are making decisions, when we are on the verge of transformation? The answer lies in the relationship between synchronicity and destiny. Destiny is a word that makes some people uneasy. It can sound rigid, as though our lives are scripted and we are merely actors following a predetermined script. But destiny need not mean predestination. It can be understood instead as the unfolding of a deeper pattern, a trajectory that is uniquely ours to live. It is not about being controlled by fate, but about recognizing that each of us has a path that aligns with our inner truth. And synchronicity, more often than not, emerges as a compass pointing toward that path. Think of the times in your life when synchronicity has appeared most vividly. Was it not when you were uncertain, when you stood between options, when you were asking silently for guidance? Synchronicities tend to cluster around these moments because they mirror the pressing dialogue within you. The unconscious, the psyche, and perhaps even the universe itself seem to conspire to place signposts along the road. They may not tell you exactly where to go, but they tell you, unmistakably, that you are on the threshold of a decision that matters. This is why so many describe synchronicity as feeling like the hand of destiny. You meet the right person at the right time. You stumble on the exact book that speaks to your struggle. You overhear words that echo your own unspoken questions. These moments do not feel accidental because they carry the flavor of alignment. It is as though life itself has leaned closer to whisper, "This is the way." But here's something essential. Synchronicity does not remove your freedom. It does not dictate your choices. It illuminates them. It brings a heightened awareness of possibility, a sense of direction. Whether you follow the signs or ignore them is still up to you. In fact, that is where destiny becomes dynamic. It is shaped not only by what is written deep in your psyche, but by the choices you make in response to what is revealed. This interplay between freedom and destiny is what makes synchronicity so profound. It reassures us that we are not wandering randomly through chaos, but it also challenges us to participate actively in our unfolding. You are not a puppet of fate, you are a co-creator of destiny. And synchronicity is one of the languages through which that co-creation takes place. Philosophically, this raises a deeper point about time. In the linear view, we move from past to present to future, and only hindsight reveals the meaning of events. But synchronicity suggests that meaning does not always wait for hindsight. Sometimes the future leaks into the present, nudging us forward. Sometimes the unconscious knows more than the conscious mind, arranging encounters and perceptions that point us toward where we are meant to go. Synchronicity collapses the rigid line of time and reminds us that past, present, and future may be more